Hey!
Hey, Seminole State family. Welcome to Research Rally Live. We are faculty librarians at Seminole State College of Florida. I'm Nicole.
Hey, I'm Jason.
I'm Ross, and
I'm Maha. Wait, can you guys see me?
yes,
Wow. I never come out early.
And we want to spend the next 30 minutes doing research with you. We are about to search, sift, sort, and suss our way through several sources. As always, we want to hear from you in the chat, especially if you have a research question. But before we get into that, we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm removing my script finder, a little bit about what is going on at Seminole State College this week. And usually we have Andrea to help us out, but she is doing a split shift today because, honey, we are busy. We are doing events, including tonight. She's going to be here tonight for Nightberry because Jason, one of the members of the Speaker Series board, will be at our Isa. How do you pronounce her name?
Isa Adney.
Isa Adney. Okay. She is our event tonight. She's speaking. She's a Seminole State College alumni. So it's very exciting to hear from her and her adventures and her successes and all of that. So this event is in Raider Connect. Yep. And when you go to Raider Connect, go ahead and sign in. Always sign in that top right hand corner. And I have a handy dandy little banner with the
Nice
URL. If you cannot physically go to
handy
this
and
event
dandy
tonight, what's that?
Handy and dandy, Nicole.
Yes. If you can't make it to the Sanford Lake Mary campus tonight, go ahead and watch it live. Okay, anywhere you are, you go to this website. If you Google Seminole State Live Video, you will find it there. And that's where the college does all of our major big speaker series and presidential speaking engagements and stuff like that. So how's everybody feeling today?
Great. Let's do some research. It's the rally.
You got me back. Listen, Maha, we didn't even do a show last week because we had Zora Day and we were busy and we barely had enough time to squeeze that in. I see we got some students joining us today. Jason, how many people are watching?
Nicole, there's 24 eyeballs on our view counter. That means 18,745 trillion, 542,405.
We have an audience.
Okay.
Million.
Well, again, we are librarians. Maha is not a librarian yet, but she is studying to become a librarian. So if you like hanging out with librarians and future librarians, go ahead and give us a like, share, a subscribe. So every week we do research. We do the research process. It can be a little messy. I'm trying out something a little bit different today, kind of setting up the situation a little bit more. In 30 minutes every week on Wednesday, we could never model the complete and entire arc of a research process that a student or a faculty or staff goes through to learn about a topic, to write about a topic. We kind of have to do it piecemeal, bits and pieces, because again, it's not a 30-minute process. It takes much longer than that. So what we are going to attempt today is to see if we can answer this question. If we need to rephrase this question, this is our research question inspired by Zora Neale Hurston, Zora N. Hurston, as she has been known in some in like prior literature and reporting. And we're librarians, but we're not experts in history or experts on Zora. So I see our special guest that we've invited today is able to join us, Professor Neil Vaz, right? Vaz.
Yes, Vaz, potato.
Well, which one is it?
Call the whole thing off.
All right, so
well,
Professor Vaz, welcome.
is-
I'm so glad you joined us today.
Okay.
So we've got 24 billion students watching.
It's a big deal, Neil. It's a big deal. There's a lot of eyeballs on today's lecture. So
Listen, listen, shout out to Professor Voss. What are some of the courses that you teach here at Seminole State? Because we definitely want to plug what you do here at Seminole State. And if students are interested, they can definitely sign up for your courses.
I teach U.S. history and I teach African American history.
Neil is one of the only professors. We've had a couple of professors sing during night prairie, but Neil, he knows what I'm going to say. During one of our lunch prairies, he was the dancing machine, and he danced, and he danced, and he danced with the students, without the students, when the library was open, when the library was closed. He's probably still dancing right now, so shout out to Neil. Appreciate you very much.
Michael Jackson.
That's what that was it. We had to get a new rug afterwards because you cut ours out.
Oh my God.
Moonwalking all over that thing.
That's right. That's right. So what are we doing, Nicole? How are we getting to our research topic? Let's jump right into it.
Okay, so what I was attempting to do here was to get us into a conversation where we would explore the process of, by virtue of research, and a research question, which is scrolling at the bottom of the screen. And this is where we're starting. We can massage it, we can alter it, we can change it however we need to, but get us thinking about how would we go about using research to argue a point or to like prove an argument and a connection between two things that are related, but maybe not completely intertwined. So here we're talking about, did Zora Neale Hurston help or hurt the civil rights movement? Now, to help set this up, I did create a non-comprehensive, it is not comprehensive, timeline to give us a frame of reference for, again, two different things. Okay, we're talking about Zora Neale Hurston and the civil rights movement connected. And again, Professor Voss is the history expert here, so correct me at any time. But if we were to argue this point, we're pulling a thread. It's not maybe necessarily spelled out, but again, that process of connecting two things. So again, not comprehensive, but Zora Neale Hurston was born in 1891. So that was after the Civil War, which ended in 1864. And it was after the 13th Amendment to the Constitution was established to abolish slavery, okay? And then after slavery was abolished, we know that we had the Jim Crow laws, which, and among other things like the Reconstruction period, which I didn't even include in here. So we had a period where African Americans, former slaves, were gaining rights, and opportunities, but it wasn't, a full, 180 from the time of slavery or even just after slavery. Okay, so she was born in 1891. And then in 1896, so this is after the 13th Amendment saying, okay, slavery is not constitutional. It was ruled that separate but equal. So segregation, where blacks and whites had separate public spaces, separate access to institutions, public spaces, voting, things like that, that was constitutional, okay? And then, so Zora would have been a young child at that point. And by the way, at this point, she was growing up in Eatonville in kind of an idealistic childhood in a mainly African-American community here in Eatonville in Central Florida. So then the civil rights movement started in about the 1940s. So this is a point where, Zora Neale Hurston is she's an accomplished author, published author. She was the first woman student at Barnard College. She was really doing a lot of things that were firsts for African Americans, African American women. She was a playwright. What are some of the other things that she was doing in her career, Professor Voss?
She was an anthropologist. She was a folklorist. She had gone to school for anthropology and studied under Frank Boas, who was instrumental in her going to Polk County, Florida, and New Orleans, and Haiti and Jamaica, and studying folk traditions and connecting those things to Africa.
Okay. So again, doing a lot of things, a lot of big things. So the civil rights movement started, and the goal was to end legalized segregation and to secure equal rights. So amidst the civil rights movement in 1954, so this is just a few short years before Zora Neale Hurston passed away in 1960, the case of Brown versus Board of Education occurred, where the separate where separate but equal was overturned. Like that precedent that was constitutional, that was overturned. So there's no separate is not equal. Okay. And Zora Neale Hurston very publicly opposed or spoke in opposition to Brown versus Board of Education. I think that's one of the things we're going to look at, some sources and dig down deeper into that. And also, just to put it in context, so in 1964, a few years after Zora Neale Hurston died, was the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that prohibited discrimination and segregation on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, and sex in voting, workplaces, places of education. So our question is about, okay, did Zora Neale Hurston help or hurt the civil rights movement? Which again, stretched through about the 1960s, and the 1964 was the Civil Rights Act of that, really kind of was a big, and I speak further to this, Professor Vaz, but that act of 1964, it cemented kind of like the goal of the whole movement. Is that correct?
Yeah. So there was, as you talked about, there was the Plessy versus Ferguson, which Brown versus Board of Education had struck down. And there was, but there was still, discrimination, especially when it came to public accommodations. So we had a Civil Rights Act of 1875 that was struck down discrimination in public accommodations, but that one expired, I think, by 1881. So pretty much, if you were a Black person and you wanted to eat, a cheeseburger in a restaurant, and you were going into this restaurant and it was white owned, and they didn't want to serve you, or they wanted to serve you, but you had to eat outside or eat in the back or go through the back door, they were able to do that until the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It makes it illegal to discriminate in public accommodations based on race and gender or creed or any of those things. So that was a big thing. And then there was an amendment to the Constitution that was also passed that made it illegal to do poll taxing and all those kinds of things right around that same time. So.
Okay. So this is the historical landscape that we're talking about. And if this was our paper, we'd definitely be digging down into this historical context. But just to set it up for us here today for our search. So one of the things that we do when we need to go and research is we talk about keywords. So search terms. So Jason, Ross, Maha, this is kind of a list I came up with where I started. Did you have, as we were talking a little bit about Zora and a little bit about the civil rights movement in the historical context, right off the bat, is there anything else that you would probably add to your list of search terms for this topic? How's it looking? I tried to do some synonyms. I tried to search for some random words like detriment. I mean, that's like a vocabulary word someone may or may not use to talk about our harm. And then advancement. I was trying to think of a synonym for advancement.
And students, go ahead and feel free to chime in on the chat here. What kind of search terms would you use? What keywords would you use? And I'm stumped right now a little bit about on the hurt part. Where did the hurt come in? And is that the word, right? Because if we really want to find the information, did she intentionally sabotage it? Did she do something to it in order to, not prevent it from moving forward? So I would probably, as a research librarian, Nicole, I'd probably put this whole question in and see what I came up with, and then do some more drilling down. Because I with hurt or harm and civil rights, I wouldn't use detriment, although this is a good start. But I would probably throw spaghetti against the wall, maybe do 10 or 12 of these, and then start slashing them down and seeing. But Professor Vaz, where do we get the hurt from? Is that Is that ringing any bells here where there may have been some actions on her part that may have stopped the forward progress, if you will?
Yeah, so where the controversy comes in with her is that she writes this letter to the Orlando Sentinel right after Brown versus the Board of Education. And she's basically talking about how this desegregation ruling can hurt the Black community. And I have the letter, I have it pulled up here, but
Oh, you do?
starts off, she says, I promise God and some other responsible characters, including a bench of bishops, that I was not going to part my lips concerning the U.S. Supreme Court decision on ending segregation in public schools of the South. But since a lot of time has passed and no one seems to touch on what to me appears to be the most important point in the hassle, I break my silence just this once. Consider me as just thinking out loud. And she goes on to talk about how it seems as though Black people are fighting for acceptance from white people rather than trying their best to create and do their own institutions and succeed in their own institutions. And she talks about how she came from Eatonville, and Eatonville raised her as to who she was and made her who she was in this day. And all the teachers, all the staff, all the administrators, all the mentors that she had in the Black community made her who she is. And to think that those people aren't worthy of being celebrated as people who had, a decent education, who brought up decent human beings, and thinking that you have to go to the white community in order to have success, she's saying that's a slap in the face to Black people. So this whole letter is basically talking about how desegregation is kind of demeaning, and it takes away the dignity from the Black community.
Okay. So that could be a piece of information, and and again, like, okay, so our research question is, did Zora Neale Hurston help or hurt the civil rights movement? So I guess and I'm going to pop up my little banner, facts versus opinion. So the fact would be that Zora Neale Hurston opposed integrated schools, right?
She opposed, I would say that she opposed forced integration.
Okay, so that's the historical fact. So is my opinion, if this is my research question, using that fact, can I, like, how does it inform my opinion if that helped or hurt the civil rights movement, which that was a part of, right? So that's what we're talking about here, is distinguishing fact versus opinion, using facts to argue a point or to basically defend an opinion. Okay, I have a source pulled up right here, and I'm just curious, like, when you saw this question, like, what was your thoughts? Like, do you think that we could rework this research question, Professor Vaz, as a history professor?
I think it's a good question, honestly, and it's something that would make a compelling argument either way, because there's a lot of people, obviously, that think that Zora Neale Hurston is a wonderful human being. She has the Zora Neale Hurston Festival. She's celebrated. But back in her day, there were a lot of people that were against her and wanted her to shut her mouth. They felt like she was hindering the progress of the movement. So I think that's definitely a good question, in a sense that especially when you look back in her day, there were people that were against the position that she took on a lot of issues. But if you could reword the question, I don't know how I would reword it.
Well, this is what we're doing. We're brainstorming. We're brainstorming it right now. We're in the student's mind right now.
Yeah.
But I would say this: maybe there's a possibility that, like, what if she didn't, like, what if she didn't care about helping or hurting the civil rights movement? Maybe what if her paradigm was completely outside of that question?
Okay, so my question I have here is, like, inferring something, or it's imparting, like, my own judgment of the situation, that she did care if she helped or hurted it. Yeah. Like, is that what you're kind of saying? Okay, that's a very good thing for our students, for us as researchers to reflect on as we're asking questions, that our bias
Yeah.
Our worldview, our level of education about the topic, like, does factor into the question we're asking. So awesome.
Because and this, the reason why I say that is because civil rights is equal protection under the law, right? And for her, I think she thought that the civil rights movement had turned into something that was not just equal protection under the law, but it was going beyond equal protection and was going into forced integration. Forced integration and equal protection under the law are not the same thing.
So, and you, Professor Vaz, you've said forced integration before and then segregation. So I'd probably use for my keywords to go back to that, Zora Neale Hurston, and either those words, segregation or forced integration. And just, again, each time students, this is going to be kind of like a roll of the dice at the casino table. Like, you don't know what you get until you put the keywords in and sort of metaphorically roll the dice on the hitting the search button. So I'd probably do something like that with segregation. Like you said, I'd probably pull out the civil rights movement at this point and then maybe put it back in. Ross, what do you think?
Well, I mean, that kind of explains. I was playing with some searches over here. That kind of explains why I didn't find a whole lot when I searched for Zora Neale Hurston and civil rights connected. Because I was kind of, not knowing a whole lot about the topic, I was kind of casting a really wide net. I just wanted to see any direction. Like, how did she impact or intersect with civil rights? And there really wasn't a whole lot of evidence in the literature. But I did see things that mentioned, like segregation and like the integration. So I'm with you, Jason. I think that's probably the stronger angle for research here.
And Ross isn't right. Jason isn't wrong. Vice versa. This is for you, students. Every time you're doing the research, how do we get these little nuggets of info? But imagine, if you will, once again, Professor Nicole in this point has given all of us students in this class this topic, and we really have to research it. This is how we approach it. That's what we're doing today on the Research Rally Live. So should we maybe try that then, Ross? Should we try to pull something up and see if we can use some of these keyword strings?
And I want to, I'll pull back again, reiterating the point for our students that are watching. Your trial and error is key with the keywords with the search terms. So that's why we're deliberating about the terminology, even the words help or hurt, like are inferring something for our research question, as Professor Vaz explained, and as well as with conflating or connecting Zora to the civil rights movement. So these are all really good research points. And I also want to pop up, I have to plug our little where is it? Oh, it's Scholarship of Conversation. Listen, Scholarship of Conversation. So when we talk about this as librarians, like, you can enter, like, when you research and you do a paper, and if you're using facts to like argue an opinion or to prove an opinion or support an opinion, you're entering the scholarly conversation. You can add new knowledge. We're asking Professor Vaz questions, but like, that doesn't mean, oh, he's the expert and like no one else can come along and say anything that challenges that or that adds to that. And as a student at college, and then in the future probably at university and beyond, and as a professional, like, you should be staying in a conversation of challenging and questioning, keeping that healthy skepticism that we ask students to apply to their research process. Okay, looking at the sources, really saying, does this answer my question? Is the authorship good for my information need? These are all good points to think about.
And as an expert in this field, Nicole, he would probably want to, Neil, you correct me if I'm wrong, but you'd probably want to have that intellectually engaging conversation with somebody else. And just to go back, when you mentioned that Orlando Sentinel letter, that was new information to me. That would go into my research at some point immediately. I got to find that letter. That sounds like a catalyst for anything.
You're going to have to get it from Professor Vaz, because you cannot get Orlando Sentinel stuff.
Well, I don't have our newspaper databases. I don't know.
We're going for.
We also have.
People have written on this already, so you can find it on a quick Google search.
Okay.
It will come up, yeah.
But just again, as an information detective, that little nugget of info, when you said it, I was like, oh, okay, well, now we have something with her voice that's kind of going in this direction that one could either go on either side of the fence. Was this doing this, or was this helping that? So keep that in mind as well, students. There's always a little bit of nugget of information, whether it's in a chapter of a book or a full book or an article, that you can start using, even in a movie. Even in somewhere where you're like, hey, did he just go into that same room? It's like, wait a minute. But as a researcher, you really want to tuck that away, and you might be able to use it later. In this case, I think that's a valuable piece of the research information.
Ross, did you find anything that looked interesting to you? Can you share your screen?
Yeah, I kind of went away from that now. I was looking at the Orlando Sentinel to see how far back our coverage goes, but it only goes back to 1985.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not
So
very far.
yeah, we wouldn't have direct access to it through our library, but
Here we go. Brandon's coming up with some info here. Zora Neale Hurston, impact on civil rights. Yeah. So again, do you need the quotation marks and stuff? I would ask all of the students watching, throw something in the chat into the search bar right now and see what you come up with. Right. See what you come up with and start some research.
Quotations around a phrase will help search that phrase instead of just all the words that are as a part of the phrase. Now with more AI it's better than it used to be, but it still is utility. Like if I do a search right now in the database and if I do civil rights, I'm going to get more matches than if I put quotation marks around the word civil rights. I found something. I'm actually curious, Professor Vaz, your take on this and how this factors into the conversation about Zora Neale Hurston, the civil rights movement, and Brown versus Board. So you mentioned she was an anthropologist. So the people that she studied were African American populations, right? Like different communities.
Yes.
She was in South Carolina and Georgia, in Florida, with different African, Louisiana,
Yeah.
right? Voodoo culture. Okay. So as an anthropologist under a white established anthropologist, which that was Franz Boas, because remember she was African American and moving in circles of mainly affluent white people. Okay, she was studying African American people, different populations, different communities, and this article out of JSTOR, one of my favorite databases, it's from the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education. This was written in 97 or 98. Okay, the political incorrectness of Zora Neale Hurston. And he says the real reason that Hurston's reputation declined between the 40s and the 70s was that as the civil rights movement led most intellectuals to regard Southern Black folk culture as a residual symptom of slavery and segregation, the curatorial impulse of the 1930s, when Hurston had traveled with Alan Lomax collecting samples of Black folk music, gave way to, okay, it's starting to get a little heady there, but basically they're saying maybe because she studied those populations and those communities that it like precluded her from like being qualified. Like it was like she was focused on something they saw as like taking them away from progress.
Yeah. So all throughout the 19th century and the early 20th century, there was an issue with negative, what people consider to be negative Black representation in the media. So it'd be like minstrel shows and blackface and all these stereotypical things. So when the Harlem Renaissance came about in the 1920s, to try to combat all this negative imagery, they were trying their best to remove themselves from stereotypes. Well, they felt that when Zora Neale Hurston was writing about her Southern life and experience and those connected to that she was taking people backwards into time and becoming basically a modern day minstrel. But these were, even though there's always a truth in some stereotypes. The stereotype that Black people like watermelon comes from the fact that West Africa, watermelon was growing natural over there, and that's what Black people typically used to like to eat in the Deep South, was watermelon. So by the mere fact that Zora Neale Hurston was just embracing her culture rather than running from it, they looked at her as kind of appeasing or placating the white man's desires to see Black people in this negative stereotypical light.
Interesting. Listen, y'all, we are only scratching the surface, and I would encourage anyone watching that this is piquing your interest to dig further into the life and research Zora Neale Hurston. There's some really great documentaries to start with on YouTube for sure. But her trajectory is so interesting. And now at this point in time, like all of this aside, like she's considered one of the top most, one of the best American writers of all time. And honestly, if you even read little snippets, it's just like pure poetry. It's not poems, but like the way she writes, to me, I'm just like, it is really amazing. And she just had a very interesting personality, and she did so many different things against so many challenges and obstacles. I mean, she basically was on her own from the time she was 14. Was that generally? I've heard different things, like it's kind of like some. But listen, if you also want to know a little bit more, if you go to at SSC English Department on YouTube, you will see Professor Vaz's lecture. Well, I don't want to call it a lecture. It was a history talk that he did last week for the Zora Day that we had here at Seminole State College. So definitely check that out. Him and as well as Professor Michael Gennaro spoke on that day. So that recording is on the English Department's YouTube channel. So that'd be another great place to go to dig a little bit further into that topic. So, all right, we're almost at time, but like Jason, what are some of our students saying? Do they have some more ideas for us for our topic today?
They love Professor Vaz. It's not written in the comments, but I can feel it in my mentals, in my energy. I could feel it. No, and Nicole, seriously, when you were having that JSTOR article that you pulled up, if you can pull that back up really quick, we just wanted to reiterate when we're evaluating that information, to your point, this is from a library database. It's from JSTOR. It's from an academic journal. It has a volume number, an issue number, and it has a DOI, a digital object identifier. I put the entire citation in the chat there. You always want to evaluate this information for credibility. And one could argue that with that research topic, this article goes directly into that, right? Because we do want to see, politically incorrect. Well, in this day and age, right? So what is this article even talking about? And as Professor Vaz was just saying, this is kind of an esteemed person in here. And now the article feels a little bit like a takedown piece or whatever. So let's dive into that and let's see what this author is talking about in this credible, reliable, scholarly, trustworthy journal in the library databases. And that's where we're continuing our conversation, because students, answer me this: did your research paper exist before you wrote it? No, it did not. So you are always creating a new piece of knowledge in your schoolwork, and we hope that you continue to be lifelong learners. So this has been a great session, Nicole.
Right there.
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to thank Professor Neale Vaz for joining us today. Thank you so much. And remember, you can go into the academic catalog and you can search for classes by professor. So if you're interested, for sure, or if you go into your student email and type VAZN, you can email Professor Vaz, and I'm sure he would be happy to direct you to his courses. So thank you again. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Remember, we are librarians. We are here to assist you with research, citations, and information needs. There's no question too big, no question too small, no question too weird. Yes, we want to hear it all. We can save you time. We can save you stress. So why haven't we heard from you yet? You can make appointments. You can chat with us. You can walk on into the library and get help. All of those contact options, I think they're in the description box below or at our library website. Just Google SSC Library and you'll find us all there. And Jason, thank you. You've got the attendance link.
For sure. Click on it. Yeah, click on it once. It's in the chat there. Click on it once and you should be good to go. If you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, compliments, let us know. Back to you, Nicole.
Yep. And we do this pretty much every week. So like, share, subscribe. We also have lots of tutorial videos that help you with research. Thank you, Brandon. We also have tutorials that help you with research and fun programming and educational programming in the library, such as that we recently enjoyed with Professor Vaz. So thank you again for joining us, and we will see you all next time.
Outro button.
Oh,